Hey everyone, welcome to Robotics. I'm excited to have our first lecture. This one's going to cover robot arms. So to get started, I want to show a video of a robot arm, and this is called a stretch robot. It's got a mobile base and then a arm that can extend and retract as well as go up and down. In the first part of this video, you see someone teleoperating the robot, and then what that means is someone's using a joystick off screen to guide the robot and show it what it should do. So here you can see the arm moving back and forth and up and down. We can teleoperate this robot to remotely control it to vacuum this couch, to move around the house in different ways. This is a great example of a robot arm as well as a mobile base attached to that arm. And in today's lecture, I want to explain the different parts of the arm and help you kind of understand some of the basic terminology that we use when we refer to robot arms. So first, I'll talk about the parts of a robot arm, and then second, I'll explain the difference between a serial and a parallel robot. And then finally, I'll introduce degrees of freedom. So let's get started with a robot arm. Now, the main component of a robot arm is something called a link. And a link is just a rigid body. In this class, you can think of a link as something that does not deform, does not change shape. It's just a block moving in space. And we're going to connect each of these different links to make the body of our robot arm. The way we connect them is with something called a joint. So a joint is a connection between two and only two links. You can see a picture of a joint right here. There are two particularly common joints that come up in robot arms, and they're called a prismatic joint and a revolute joint. I'll start off with the prismatic joint. Now, a prismatic joint allows two links to translate with respect to one another along one fixed axis. Here, the two links are moving up and down with respect to one another. That's a prismatic joint, which allows translational motion. A revolute joint, which you see on the right, same basic idea, but this one allows for rotational motion. So it's got two links that are connected by a revolute joint, and they're allowed to rotate with respect to one another around one single fixed axis. So that's a revolute joint. We can make more complicated joints by combining these different prismatic and revolute components. And so for the purposes of this class, the main two joints we need to know are prismatic and revolute joints. Okay, so we've got our joints, they're connecting our links, but how do we actually make the system move? To do that, we need to use something called an actuator. And an actuator could be as simple as a DC motor, as complicated as a pneumatic system, but an actuator is powering our joints and it's causing these links to move with respect to one another. We can have multiple actuators along our robot arm, connected maybe at each of the different joints to cause this whole arm to move. And then usually we want our arm to do something. And to do that thing, we often have to have an end effector, which is just a gripper at the end of the robot arm to grab and manipulate different objects in the environment. So in summary, our robot arm is composed of links that are connected with joints, powered by actuators, and usually we have an end effector at the end. That's the mechanical part of the arm, but there's also some sensors that we need to use to figure out not only where the arm is, but also what's going on in the world around us. So the first sensor I'm showing on the top is an encoder. And this encoder is used to figure out the angle of a given joint. It's either its translation or its rotation. So it can tell you how many degrees you've rotated or how many meters you've translated in space. So that'll be an internal sensor that we have. Maybe we have multiple of these internal sensors along our robot arm. Now on the bottom, you see two external sensors that we use to see the world around us. On the left, a camera, and we're using that camera to figure out which side of the block is facing forward. And on the right, we've got LiDAR attached to this autonomous car, and we're using the LiDAR to kind of see pedestrians, other vehicles, obstacles that are around us in space. So LiDAR and camera are two examples of external sensors that I could use to see the world around me. Okay, two other terms that are really important for robot arms, some vocabulary that we need. The first one is called the joint space, and that's all the possible joint values that your robot can have. And to explain this, I'm going to take my own arm. Let's think about it as a robot, and let's look specifically at my elbow joint. If we call this 0 degrees and we call this 180 degrees, I can say that the joint space of this specific joint is 180 degrees. So I go from 0 to 180. Now, the joint space of the entire arm is formed by doing that same process, but for each joint along the arm and concatenating that into one large vector. And so here, you can kind of see the joint space is shown by these different arrows that are highlighting, hey, this joint can rotate this many degrees, and this joint can translate so many degrees, and so on and so forth. So that's your joint space. The other thing we need to know is our workspace. So if the joint space is what the robot arm can move internally, the workspace is where I can put my end effector, all the different positions I can reach, as well as the different orientations I can have. So the workspace is shown by this green sphere. That is all the positions and orientations that my robot can reach. That's the workspace. Okay. So yes, there are different types of robot arms, and really there's two very common types of robot arms that we need to know about. The first one is a serial robot. Now, a serial robot has got one open chain with a connection to the ground. As an example, let's just take our own arm, right? So if you think about your own arm, you can think about your shoulder as the ground, sort of the base of this arm, and then here's the rest of the arm moving in space. This would be an example of a serial robot because it's an open chain. Right? And then you can see another serial robot on the screen in front of you. This is a Franco robot. It's got this connection to the ground. It's got all the different links connected by joints. And then it's got its end effector, which here is very precisely positioning this block to insert it into this mount. So this would be an example of a serial robot. The other type of robot that's common, although it's less common, is a parallel robot. Now, a parallel robot has got one or more closed kinematic chains. One example, you can take both of your arms and clasp them together. You can see that there is a closed chain when you do this. You've got two different connections to the ground, and you can try moving your arms around in space while holding your hands together. That's an example of a parallel robot. You can see another parallel robot on the screen in front of you. This one is, again, very quickly moving these different beads around the mount. Okay, so we've got serial, we've got parallel robots. What are some of the pros and cons? Now here you might want to pause the video and think for a second to yourself, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of these two different types of robots? Okay, so for the serial robot, like again, just take a single arm, it's got a larger workspace, so it can reach more positions in the world around us. And every time you add a new joint to this robot, you get more mobility. You get an additional degree of freedom. And I'll explain what that means a bit later in this presentation. So that's the strengths of the serial robot. And in practice, serial robots are the most common type of robot arm because of these advantages. However, a parallel robot also has strengths. It's more precise, it's got more force capability, and it's got faster motions. And there are a couple reasons for that. One is that we've mounted all of our motors at the base of this robot. And so the links and joints that move towards the end effector are a lot lighter, and we can move them around faster. The reason that we can have more precise motion is because the errors that we have in one arm are balanced out by the other arms. And so we're kind of taking an average, and that can help reduce the amount of error in this overall system. So it can be more precise, it can move more quickly, and because we've got multiple motors at the base, we can have a larger force output. Okay, so I mentioned this term a couple times. What is a degree of freedom? And to explain this concept, I really want to just show you a couple examples. I think it's pretty intuitive once we go through these examples. So in this first example, think about this car. And this car, imagine it's driving around on a plane, a 2D plane, an XY plane. You could take maybe a table as an example. And think to yourself, how many coordinates would you need to fully specify where this car is in space? Now, you probably thought at least two, right? I need to know my X and Y positions for the car. And if you were very clever, you might have recognized I need three. I need to know the X and Y positions, as well as the orientation around the Z axis. What angle is my car pointing? So I need three coordinates in total to specify where this car is in space. Okay, in another example, same idea. How many coordinates will I need to specify where this robot is in space, the robot's configuration? Now, there are a few answers here that are all good. One would be 3. I've got this robot arm, and it's got these 3 different joints. And each of these joints are revolute joints. And if I specify the position of each revolute joint, then I'll know kind of the overall configuration of the robot. Another good answer would be 4, because I can do the same thing for those 3 joints, but then I could also say whether the gripper is open or closed, and that could be a 4th degree of freedom. I could also say 7. I could have the 3 for these different joints. I could have the 4th for the gripper, and then 5, 6, and 7 could be the XYZ position of the base of that robot. So 3, 4, and 7 are all good answers for this question, and it really just depends on how you want to think about it. Bonus points, of course, if you realize that this was a serial robot arm. But if you're kind of understanding these two examples, then you get the idea of what is a degree of freedom. So degrees of freedom, that's the minimum number of coordinates that I need to capture a robot's configuration, like where it is in space, position, orientation, all those things. How many coordinates do I need to capture that? So if I need n coordinates, then my robot has got n degrees of freedom. And as a tip, we often abbreviate degrees of freedom by just writing DOF, degrees of freedom. Okay, so we've talked about the parts of a robot arm. We've mentioned the differences between serial and parallel robot arms. We've also covered this term, degrees of freedom. Before we move on, I would encourage you to practice your understanding of these concepts by doing the practice set. You can find it in the description or in the pinned comment. Now in this practice set, there's two parts. The first page has got the problems for you to try to solve. And then once you've given them an attempt, you can look at the following pages, which have the solutions for you to review and see if you understand these different concepts. After you've done that practice set, feel free to move on to the next lecture, and we'll talk about the position and rotation and how we capture these different concepts for robot arms. So I'll see you next time.